What's up, y'all? Today we're talking to the judges of Burgh 2022, Kuntal, Simran, ASG, and Anil about their placings at arguably the most stacked lineup of the year. So be sure to hit that subscribe button and let's get into it.
Watch the breakdown.
So overall, the rubric is out of 125 points. If you want the full rubric, I'm putting it in the show notes or the comments somewhere. If you want to read it, but you guys can read it on your own.
Primarily, the changes that we made were where we added 5 points to difficulty of choreography, which falls under set design, and then 5 points to formations, which is under set execution. And the primary reason why we did that was because last year, a lot of teams did have restrictions as to how they were practicing. It was post-COVID, so there was a lot of remote teams that weren't able to meet in person. This year, it's kind of back to normal. Teams are able to start practicing in person, so we just wanted them to challenge themselves and try to bring something that was more difficult.
Yeah, I guess one thing I would add, and I know the other guys touched on it a little bit, but when the comp was talking to the panel about the lineup they think they were going to get, and we were talking about what their vision for the show was, they really wanted it to be, they wanted it to highlight the strength of the lineup. And so for the judges, when we were thinking about what we can do to the rubric to push teams to really bring it, we said, well, you know, what really makes teams bring it is if they push themselves to not bring a simple set. So if we increase the point value for difficulty, that should encourage teams to go for it.
Soormay was at a 95.75. SPD was at a 94.50. First class was at an 87.88. Furteelay was at an 84.25. Alamo at 73.88. Mob 68.38. GT 65.75. And UVA 58.88.
So primarily, one thing I do want to start with was first, second, and third was unanimous. All 4 of us had the same placings. Alamo was 5th for 3 judges and 6th for 1 of the judges. So there were 14 points behind 3rd, 10 behind 4th. I think the primary issue that a lot of the crowd doesn't see is you get a front view, whereas we get a slightly higher view. So they had a shikha drop right in the first minute. A girl fell. There was a bump between their purple and blue dancer. And overall, I think Alamo has amazing dancers throughout the team, but when it comes to sync, they had a lot of dancer discrepancies. So certain dancers are killing it harder than others, not enough rotation of dancers to the front, and just not enough creativity in set design in comparison to the top 4 teams, which did cause them to lose points in not just set design, but dancer execution, set execution, because everyone looked different.
I don't think you necessarily have to tone oneself down. But when it comes to set creation, one thing that was always told to me was that the choreography has to be able to be done by your weakest link, right? If they can't do that, there's no point if they can't hit that choreography or that set or do the set at 100% of what it should be, then you should be making changes or adjust the set so that everybody can do it as a team. And that's the biggest thing. It's a team game. It's a team sport. It's a team dance. It's not a one-man show, one-woman show. You have to include everybody.
So I was a little bit harsh in the meeting with their captain, Ricky. I said, look, man, you got a stacked roster of female dancers on your team. Why are they not highlighted more? Why, even one call out I had was obviously you have Anil, who's been on the team and is highlighted with Ricky as a Jody, but you have Ashley on the team, who the last comp that Simran and I judged, I think she got the best dancer award, and we felt like this isn't necessarily something they lost points for, but it was a missed opportunity to highlight the strengths that they did have on stage in their dancers, specifically their female dancers. I just didn't feel like they were displayed to showcase their talent.
Hey, really quickly, I'm just going to plug our Patreon. So if you want to listen to the entire 1 hour and 45-minute conversation with the judges completely unedited, be sure to go in the description box below and check out our Patreon. In that conversation, you have all the nuanced takes from the judges about the placings, as well as some listener questions that y'all asked, and then also just a bunch of stuff that I had to cut from the placings conversations that we had in this episode. Anyways, go listen to this entire unedited conversation on our Patreon, as well as some other bonus content from other episodes. All right. Bye.
Well, overall, we pretty much went through each and every section. And right off the bat, as you can see, first class placed higher than Furteelay by 1 or 2 points all across the board. So all 4 judges had them higher in every single section. They better highlighted their unique moment. I think we all agreed. And overall, their set was more memorable. And although Furteelay, and we said this to them in the judges meeting as well, they had really small, subtle parts that set them apart from other teams. FCB sold their moments better, which helped gain points in impact, stage presence, sync, execution, and it was unanimously third.
I think a lot of conversations around how did first class get third and Furteelay get fourth. But I think the conversation also is how close Furteelay was to third. We're not saying, Furteelay were a lot far behind than first class. Yeah, there was little things that what Lalli said that brought him up to third place. But like if I was first class, like I'd be scared of Furteelay on going up to the next stage, because like it's easy for them to just pop up and get third place. So, if teams are wondering why did they lose and get fourth, but I think it's like how far, like what could they do next time they go on stage? Because they're really, really close on getting, a third place or the second place.
So you mentioned that SCB sold their moments better and they just overall had more memorable moments. What are some examples of those?
Yeah. So to go over specifics, like they had right in the beginning, their yellow guys jumped over the Shika. It was dope. They had their lightsaber gimmick, and we did tell them kind of on how to improve it a little bit, but again, it was something different that a team brought for that specific lineup. And just tiny, tiny little moments, like their drops, like Jugni drops were hitting harder from where we were at. And like every 30 to 40 seconds, they did have something that they were trying to sell to the audience. So they're really good at just throwing something small in every segment.
Second thing, like even in Soormay, like they had like that half of the stage that they dropped did like some Dougie-esque move, while the other half did it in a more Bhangra version. That way, like they kind of sold that like there is like the Bhangra aspect to this, but we're also trying to be creative with it. They had like a one-handed Junda single drop on their Fumania. It was like kind of like things like that where like they made their subtleties like their key moments, right? Whereas in other teams, I think what Furteelay did was like the subtleties that Furteelay had were all like hidden within their transitions. They were really nice, but because they're all transitional and like they weren't the main focus, it kind of like those subtleties kind of got lost with the rest of the set.
So when you say subtleties of transitions, can you give an example of that?
For instance, they had slow tumor and they transitioned into fast, which was nice, but the energy levels between the slow to the fast didn't help sell that moment. Another thing that I would say is they did them all into a Jigni drop, and the way that they transitioned into it was nice, but they didn't go low enough. Their shoulders weren't popping enough to have an effect. The main thing that we did notice was, like our favorite part of their set was their Fumania. Like they had so much fun on stage. They had great energy. The crowd was loving it.
I did
And
love
that,
that one. Yeah.
yeah, like that key moment was what we wanted from the rest of the moment they were trying to highlight. That same energy, that same excitement that they were having on stage. I think even with, so they had their 2 Shika locks, which all judges across the board did deduct points for. But even with deductions, they were still not only placed higher in scoring, but even if it had come down to deliberation, the rest of their set was still done in a better way. Execution, individual execution, set execution, their choreography, their difficulty. So it wouldn't feel right to bring them down because of a shikolok when everything else overall, they were still beating Furteelay by.
Did I love the FCB set? No. But did they showcase creativity every 60 seconds? Yes. Did they showcase difficulty for the most part throughout the entire set? Yes. Were the formations interesting? Yes. Were they cohesive between mix to formations to choreo? Yes. So, they check off a lot of boxes on the rubric and earn their way up to a third spot. And, when all four judges are unanimous 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the placings, there's not a lot to discuss at that point. Especially when I think there was like a 4 or 5 point spread between FCB and Furteelay once all the averages were done. We did have that conversation. I actually went line by line at the rubric and said, okay, let's just talk through and make sure we feel like we're on the same page here. It was a clear first place for Soormay. I think that Soormay was the second best dancing team of the night after SPD, but not by a long shot. They were quite good. They danced really well. Now, we called them out for being flat-footed at times. And SPD did have better stage presence. They did have stronger form, but Soormay wasn't far behind. And where Soormay was able to make up the gap there was their set design.
And I think when you talk about the teams in particular, SPD nailed almost perfect points in the dancer execution part. Understanding of Bhangra, for myself, I know they got 10 out of 10, but where they did lose points was creativity, difficulty, design and creation of formations, which is a solid 45 points on the rubric. Yes, it's difficult to do a 9-minute set and execute it to that caliber of perfection when it comes to the Bhangra itself, which they did get points for. However, although the choreography itself was very folk, there wasn't a lot of unique or fresh elements. They didn't take very many risks. And in comparison to Soormay, they did shikla for less than a minute. Their tumor was extremely stationary. Their ending was a lot more simple, which didn't create a lot of excitement or memorability for us. Whereas, although Soormay did execute their set quite well, their choreo was exciting as well. They had a build up in each segment, whether it was something subtle or whether it was something that was very, very evident. So the decision was pretty clear cut.
And we're not asking teams. I think somebody did bring that up. Like, we're not asking teams to like do the unthinkable and put Bhangra on the back and just to complete a certain thing. But you are competing against teams who are also creative, and that's the reason why we made a rule this way. So that way, a team who's creative has to come down to a level of doing Bhangra properly. But a team who knows Bhangra, they gotta also come out and be creative at the same time. We want to make it fair ground for everybody. But like, we just didn't see anything memorable in the team aside from the Bhangra. Like, the Bhangra was just unstoppable. Like, this competition was about how well you can do Bhangra, of course, that can place. But we had certain things on the rubric where we wanted something refreshing. We wanted to see something unique, and not unique in the sense of how well you can do Bhangra, but unique in the sense of, yes, you can do Bhangra, and you can say, look at the way we did Jumber. But that's fine, but doing Jumper in one line is going to take points away from a different aspect.
Just kind of to tailgate off of that too. You also have to look at, like, especially in this rubric, the description of creativity of choreography was the choreography fresh and exciting? Were there unique elements in the routine? And you have to understand that this is only being applied to the 8 to 10 teams that show up that night. It's not applied to like how we've seen it before ever in the circuit. It's that we're judging the teams at that competition under this rubric. So once again, yeah, creativity is like very subjective. Any team can bring whatever they want, and it could be creative to them. But you should also understand, like, you should do your research into like what are the teams like you're competing against. Like, if you have like a team like FCB and Furteelay who are known to like kind of do unique things, right? How are you as a very folk traditional team going to be creative in comparison to them while still maintaining Bhangra, like proper Bhangra? So it's like stuff that you can do, like little things that you can look into and how to like stand out from the rest of the crowd at that competition.
Yeah. And last thing I do want to touch on is a lot of people could argue that SPD's set was more creative than Soormay's, but like we mentioned, we only get one look.
Because they think, well, look at the video. Can't you see now that this team was more creative? Maybe, yeah, if you show me little things. But again, we get one look. And if you want that one look to stand out, then don't do a line. You can do line, that's fine, but just understand that now we're just looking at you dancing. Like, the minute you make a line, we're going to look at you dancing, nothing else. But the minute that line is shifting, it's rotating in a certain way, we're already looking at dancing, but now we're seeing more creative juice coming out of that performance. And we weren't asking for a lot, but we were asking for a little bit more.
Sets get more appreciated when they're watched in HD, like the videos that you took up close, HD, and you could see every little nuance and detail that's in there. That's not the same vantage point and view and experience.
Are you sure about that?
Experience that you're gonna have as a judge. Us as a judge are zoomed out. We're watching the holistic, presentation of the set and performance and the dancing. It's a different lens, and so I think the most important thing for new captains is to make sure that whatever you do come up with, make it blatantly obvious that what you're doing is really cool.
And also, we've been talking a lot about how SPD lost. But like, how did Soormay win this competition?
I think we kind of did touch on a little bit of it, but although there wasn't one particular wow factor, they had something in every single segment that was different. Something that brought uniqueness, whether it was a move, a formation, a rotation, and that helps you get points in every single category, especially in set design. And one thing that we all said right after the performance was done was that we loved the 2007 vibe the performance gave. I don't know if the crowd felt it, but we felt like we transported back 10 years into the 2000s and we were watching a set from back then. And that in itself is a huge risk because you don't know if it's going to pay off in 2022.
Like nostalgia can go really far if you do it really well. So I think that was their key. I think they tapped into something. Watching Soormay on stage kind of made me want to dance again. And I'm like, well, if that's the type of set that's going to come on stage and they can execute it this way, there's chance for a guy like me who's retired, 4 or 5 years ago, I can come back. I think SPD went into the academy saying, we're going to do fine and we're going to make sure we win with that. I think Soormay went in with a different thought. If they had a mission in mind, I think they completed it.
Another thing I liked about Soormay is I felt like they just exuded confidence. And you could tell that they danced as a team and not just with each other, but for each other. The way they interacted with each other, the way that they set up their moments, the way that they had presence, it just felt so unified in their, I know Amrit used the word mission, but I think that's proper here. I think that's appropriate. They just, I don't know, it didn't feel like anyone was lagging behind, even if they took a breather for a second in the back in a transition or something. It didn't feel like they ever let up on their mission to show up and rip it. And that's what I felt like they came to do. Just 1 to 12, show up and rip it.
If you want to watch the performances from the competition, be sure to check them out here. And if not, thank you again to all our Patreon supporters for all the help in making this episode possible. And I want to specifically shout out UC Shakeen, Adnan, Karthik, Jasmeet, SS, Darsh, Siddharth, Ashwin, Sioban, Manveer, Jashan, Girit, Sheesh, Givan, Ravi, Sani, Saab, Bhavin, and Faraz.